Member for Oak Bay, Gordon Head.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. I was coming to on section 5B, where it says by adding the following paragraph. I was wondering if in more detail the Minister could provide exactly what was meant and what was being thought of when this paragraph that reads as follows: exempting a person, an organization, or a thing, or a class of persons, organizations, or things from any provisions of Division 2.1 or the regulations under this division in circumstances and on conditions that the Lieutenant Governor in Council prescribes. If a few examples could be given in some detail. And the reason why I ask this is this sure looks to me like it's essentially a loophole that essentially grants Lieutenant Governor and Council powers to do anything they want. And I don't have any sense of guidance from this language as to what was intended here.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, first, the provision exists already. Here we are. There is already a provision under the Environmental Management Act that is similar. So under 30, is it 38? Oh, thank you. Under section 138S, exempting any operation, activity, industry, waste, or works, or any class of persons, operations, activities, industries, wastes, or works from any or all of the provisions of this Act or the regulations in circumstances and on conditions that the Lieutenant Governor and Council prescribes. We have, in adding D, then specified what would be in this legislation. So in this case, exempting a person, an organization, or a thing, or a class of persons, organizations, or things from any provisions of Division 2.1 or the regulations under this division in circumstances and on conditions that the Lieutenant Governor and Council prescribes. So the intent in having this added to our new set of sections that are amending EMMA, it is to accomplish the same thing that we have done in EMMA. So I'll provide an example. We have, of course, in this legislation, much of the public attention is on topics of interest to them, primarily right now, shipment of oil. That's what people think about, an oil pipeline or what have you. But the effect of this legislation will be felt upon all 100 and some odd classified hazardous substances and how they're stored and used and transported and how that relates to spills. So for example, and this decision has not been made, but one of the things that we are currently, or staff are currently examining is, should one include your corner gas station under this scheme? Or is there a more appropriate way to deal with that? So the power is there not for the purpose of being used widely to allow everyone to cheat on the legislation. And certainly we can see in evidence the fact that this has not been a power widely used under EMMA. The same would hold true here. It simply allows for the ability to exempt when we encounter a circumstance that really is presenting an unintended consequence and capturing those that maybe don't fit very well under this scheme.
Member.
Thank you, Honourable Chair, and thank you for the answer. I guess my concern is when you go to EMMA, it's a little more specific. Here we're talking about a thing, that this addition, this paragraph, exempts a person, an organization, or a thing. So when I hear language like "or a thing," that implies to me that it can be anything. And I get that the purpose of this is to provide powers for Lieutenant Governor and Council to exclude perhaps a corner store gas station. But my worry here is that there's so much of this is left to regulation that essentially we're being asked to trust government with the enabling legislation, trust government to define a thing. So can you possibly, and my question through you to the Minister is, final question is, can you please give me very specific examples of a thing, or why the word "a thing" was included in this legislation? Because my understanding is that was not in the EMMA. It was talking about waste and other more descriptive terms, but here we're talking about a thing. And that's not defined, at least my recollection is a thing is not defined, and it's left up to our imagination.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In fact, the inclusion of the word thing is also important to these amendments. So the previous definition of spill read as follows. Spill means the introduction of a substance into the environment, whether intentional or unintentional, otherwise than as authorized under this Act. The new definition adds, make sure I'm getting the right one, the new definition of spill reads as follows, means the introduction into the environment other than as authorized under this Act and whether intentional or unintentional of a substance or thing that has the potential to cause adverse effects to the environment, human health, or infrastructure. So it was twofold, or sorry, the definitions, the inclusion in the definitions is important because it takes us beyond a substance. It could be cargo that in and of itself isn't a substance, but maybe it has a substance in it. So we're trying to capture as widely as we can. But that also is why we have included this in the exemption. So someone spills something, is that thing something we want captured within this or not? And we would have, under this exemption, the discretion to manage that. Again, though, it is certainly an exception, and the provisions under EMMA have not been utilized very frequently. I don't anticipate that these would be utilized any more frequently. But important for us as we develop the regulatory scheme and the implementation of this, that as we become aware of instances that capture in some way unintended, that we be able to provide that exemption and therefore manage under the Act. And also it's important that if something was to be enacted by Lieutenant Governor and Council, now, albeit those decisions are not made in public, the decision is public, and certainly no government would be able to get away with doing something like that secretly, because all of that would be known in public.
Member.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. I just wanted to thank the Minister for that response. It's very helpful in clarifying the meaning of thing in the context of the definition of spill, so thank you.
Shall